So today's tip is much more general than game development, as we'll get to in a moment. That's another way they work with people and potentially could work with you coming up. But it's about the difference between what is called backcasting and pre-morteming. This actually emerged from one of my current business clients who I meet with on a regular basis. And it's just one of a dozen things we talked about in the call, but it's a generalizable tip that I figure I can share with you. And this is just about thinking ahead, and it's two different ways to look at, are you going to be going the right direction for stuff? And this is something I think about continuously because as a small business owner acting independently, I've got lots of flexibility and control, and some of the trouble is making sure I don't wind up doing the wrong thing for months at a time. So pre-mortem, of course, you're probably familiar with post-mortem from the games scene, where people look at after the fact what went wrong. Pre-mortem is pretty much what it sounds like. In either of these words you can Google, you'll find more information about different ways people use these terms. But in the broad sense, right, it's anticipating what could go wrong before it does. Either to go in eyes open, that those are trade-offs you're making, or perhaps to pivot a different direction. Maybe even to size up a few different options as alternatives to figure out between those, which of those downsides are you most comfortable with. That's what pre-mortem is. And that's in contrast to backcasting, which is a different process where instead, and this is when Sid, my client, introduced me to that term, which I've been using now for many years. We're just talking to friends about his Twitch channel, which I'm going to put his name on the spot. But backcasting is this kind of exercise where you think about, in the future, if this was going well, what would it look like? And then working backwards from that to figure out, how do you connect those dots? And it's usually not linear, right? It's usually not as simple as a fifth there, 2/5 there. It's usually not as straightforward as cut in the middle and halfway, but figure out what maneuvers do you need to do to convert it into that. Knowing it may deviate along the way, it may not happen exactly the way you predict, but that there's at least a path conceivably between where you're at and where you could imagine this being worth going. And those are two different exercises, and of course, as Sid was emphasizing, there's always value in both. But in terms of, at any given time, there's still a lot of tools we can decide between. And the way I suggested framing these, I think it will be helpful for you to figure out which one applies to the situation you're in, is that in the case of pre-mortem, where you're looking at what could go wrong to avoid things going catastrophically wrong, really it's kind of a defensive maneuver. It is a securing your footing. It is figuring out that, okay, well, I'm doing well enough, I need to not let this crumble. Or it could also be because, and again, the nature of defense, you feel like you're in a spot where there is stuff coming at you, whether it's competition, whether it is other challenges, but you're trying to avoid a worst case, very real scenario of obliterated. Can't continue doing what you're doing because you didn't anticipate the right risks to mitigate, the right downsides coming up for paths you could take before you took them. And again, even though there's an element of risk mitigation in this backcasting thing, that's a much more aggressive or offensive approach. And not offensive, but on the offense, right? In the sense of, I am actually not where I need to be yet. It is not sufficient for me to keep my footing. I need to grow actively towards a different direction that is not the same form that I have now. And this is what makes it offense. It's about changing the situation that you're in. It's that you can't just batten down the hatches, find a way to defend it. And part of what I was discussing with him as a business client, right, is that in many cases, especially for a small business, it is not yet a firm enough footing to purely be playing defense. You've still got to be growing, or, it's actually true for a lot of businesses of any scale, if you're not growing, then you're decaying, then you're falling apart. Because it's just the nature of erosion, the nature of time, nature of changing landscapes, all this kind of stuff comes into play, where if you're not growing faster than you're shrinking, there is actually no easy way to just tread water comfortably. Or at best, that might be a side effect of the fact that you are trying to grow as aggressively as you can, and finding that is, competing against, say, your natural churn or something like that. So anyway, two simple tools to look into. Sid's been just great for opening lives. Part of what I love about working with business clients is that it's not just the same kind of conversations of me deploying tools I teach in self-command or get yourself to do things material. It's not just talking about game development stuff, but it's often me learning too about new ways to frame and talk about these things. Now, where this comes from, and part of what I'm sharing today, is that at any given time, outside of my home team game dev, which is my main work that I do, and that's helping freeware developers around the world on collaborative teams learn and move their game development forward as a craft, as a hobby, for some of them as a career portfolio filling exercise. Outside of there, at any given time, there's other work that I do, right? I have a few personal clients who actually are working on commercial games in ways that aren't stuff we do in home team. I've got a few clients who work on business things that aren't actually related to games, but in the same kind of way that I've been now running my second business since 2013. My first business started 2009. I've got a lot of years under my belt working for myself, and I can help advise people on doing that, knowing full well it's risky, it takes time, it takes experimentation, but I can share that experience with somebody. Or also do youth client training. So at any given time, I have one or two much younger people. Normally I'm working 18 and older in my home team groups or for my business clients, but I also give lessons for younger people. I've given coding classes to people as young as 4. That's not typical. More often, I'm working with ages kind of 10 to 15-ish for youth lessons, where it's some mixture of programming, not just for games, general programming concepts, technical computation stuff, questions they have about the intersection of that in other areas of career life, or about basics of understanding things like intellectual properties come up in these discussions sometimes. Just little things that can help fill in these gaps to give people a better footing, hopefully a head start advantage in their college application process, in their development of skills, and finding their footing sooner than their peers at something they can really build on into their high school years, going into college, going into career, and so on. Anyway, these are services that I mentioned. I'm normally not plugging a lot because I don't have a lot of openings for that. Most of my work is home team. However, I'm not returning to Northeastern in the fall. I've already let them know. I had no regrets about teaching there in the fall and spring. Taught 4 classes for Northeastern. Time well spent. However, I am getting back about a quarter of my week going forward, and some of that's going towards home team. Some of it also opens up another slot or 2 in which I could be giving your child lessons over Zoom. I could be giving you help guided through the situation you're struggling against in terms of building up your business or learning to work for yourself. I kind of give it inflating the life raft, right? Where I'm not trying to build the Titanic to get off the Titanic. I am trying to be ready for when this thing hits the iceberg, because I know that it's a scary world, a lot of uncertainty out there. Things beyond our control can cause what seems like a stable, comfortable position to be taken out from underneath us because people... Anyway, you know those realities. I don't need to convince you of that. Anyway, if you're curious about this, you can go to chrisdelion.com as opposed to my usual URLs. That's just my personal kind of miscellaneous background site. You can read various things about my background, about how it may intersect to what you're doing. And you'll see most of it's not really a sales page. It's about here's some curious things. I've also got some speaking things I've done in the past. If you're interested in applying, reaching out to see if there's a fit there, there's a form you can fill out. It's pretty simple, just a handful of questions. What have you done so far? What are you trying to do? Which of these categories would you see us working together? But at the time of this video, those are still open, so you can fill those in. You got a place in there you can indicate if there's a time frame you need to know back within a month, within a few months, within a year, indefinitely when you want me to reach out. Because again, I typically, when I put out these kind of call outs, I get more requests than I am able to fulfill. It's a matter of fit, not a matter of quality, not a matter of rating, not a matter of I don't believe you. It's a simple matter of there's only so many hours and people I can work with in the week. Obviously, too, my cost per hour is higher than some other folks who don't have the same experience or background that I do. I do have some free or more low-cost materials, group trainings, etc. Or ultimately, I just may not be the right fit if that's not where you're at in terms of the seriousness of what you're going about or the situation you're able to take a shot on. So you'll see also a few notes, testimonials there from actually Sid, this guy I'm talking about, as well as some other people working out for a lot of years, either individual game developers on their commercial or outside individual non-home team projects, or even a quote from one of the parents, a couple of parents who have a long-time student I've been working now with for years. That's been great working with him. And so anyway, I've got bandwidth for another person or two. You can find out more about chrisdelion.com at the time of this video. That's still open to fill out the application if you're curious to work with me on this kind of stuff. These are the kind of things we talk about in terms of making steps forward. And then, of course, me pulling from my trove of background of experience or contacts or connections or things I've witnessed up close or talked about people on the podcast, etc. Not to ever tell you what to do, right? I focus on, I'm never in the driver's seat. I'm in the navigator seat, helping kind of make sure you're aware of what's coming up or different pathways. Not unlike what we do with Home Team. Of course, Home Team scales better for game developers who are just trying to learn the fundamentals, who are trying to get practice, trying to make games for the fun of it. But this is a very different kind of thing that I do at so much higher intensity on a regular weekly 1-hour call on Zoom basis, typical format. I'll read real quick, actually, this blurb that Sid wrote for me. He's, by the way, he's a private guy, right? You're going to see his last name there. It's true for a lot of my individual clients. Some like to share their last names. Some prefer to kind of be kept in stealth. This also includes some, I'm going to give away too many details here, academic people who feel insecure about concern that if their workplace finds out I'm helping them, they might worry that that could come back to be a negative or concern, that they look like they're putting their views elsewhere. Someone who's in a game studio doing games on the outside, worried that that's going to cause them economic stress with their current secure position. Anyway, I respect client confidentiality. Comfortably here, shared first name, last initial, Sid. I've worked with Chris for a few months now to help me move forward in my business, and I've probably saved years of running off in unhelpful directions. His sharp and targeted questions, coming from a large and diverse amount of knowledge and experience, have yielded many helpful insights and given me a sense of momentum, which was missing before I met him. Anyway, could be you. If you're curious, check it out at chrisdelion.com. Hope this video helped you out. All the stuff before the pitch, thinking about for your way forward, is it a better tool for you to focus on first or primarily pre-mortem? What could go wrong? So you know that, so you can steer against that, so you can compare a few different alternatives. Or on the other side, backcasting. If it worked out, what then might be the steps or the lily pads between here and there? Lots of tools we can use depending on the context you're in. Deciding which one's a fit for you can be a key part of moving forward. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks always for tuning in. Catch you all next time.